Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for part 2 of the Flanders Poppy tutorial. Just wanted to first thank Susan for showing us how to make this awesome center for the poppy. It looks very cool. So we'll go ahead and jump in and get started on these petals here. So you'll get something that looks similar to this. And then once we're done here, we'll send it back off to Susan to finish off the stem, make some leaves and seed pods as well. So thank you so much for joining me, and we'll get started. So the supplies we're going to need are our favorite pairs of scissors, the center that we made with Susan, tacky glue, a glue stick, red crepe paper. This is the cherry extra fine crepe from Leah Griffith. I believe that's in her Enchanted Garden pack. And then the extra fine black, also in that same pack as well. And then either a white paint pen or a white gel pen for the detail on the black. All right, so get some of this out of my way here. So the first thing we're going to do is cut our red paper. And to size, what we're going to do is actually cut a couple of pieces here that are about 2 inches wide, and then another set that is 3 inches wide. So I'm going to do 2 inches first. And then I'll do my 3-inch piece next. And if you're planning on making a bunch of these, what you could do is actually double the width of these pieces that you're cutting out, and then you can cut 2 at a time. But for this, I'm just going to cut them in singles. All right, so the 2-inch is actually going to be, we're going to cut 2 petals from this that are also 2 inches tall. So I'm going to cut that next. Stack that on top of each other so we get about the same size, and we'll make another cut here as well. All right, so we got those 2, and then I'm going to do the same height of 2 inches on these 3-inch wide petals. What I'll do is I'll actually group this up here so I can do a single cut. Stack that and then cut another one. Okay, so now we have our 4 red petal pieces. I'm actually just going to stack them right on top of each other like that, so they match up just like that. And I've already done that with this one as well. All right, so then the next thing we're going to do is actually take this and fold it in half, exactly in half, and then take our detail scissors and just round off the corner here. Just like that. Okay. And then we'll do that with the 2-inch as well. And you'll want to start maybe about 1/3 of the way down on the petal as your starting point when you do this rounded corner, and then just kind of turn the paper as you cut. So you get a nice arc there. And then you can kind of smooth that out if you've got a sharp edge there, or corner. All right, so now we've got 4 pieces that all have this rounded corner. And that's all we're going to do for the cutting on these. So then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our black paper, and I've already cut some pieces here. So I've done a piece here that is 7/8 of an inch wide and 4 inches long. And then another one that's also 7/8 of an inch wide and 3 inches tall or long. So then what we're going to do is I'm actually going to cut these in half. So I'm going to fold it in half first, fold it, and then cut it along the fold, just like that. So we get these 2 pieces here. Or actually, let's go with these. And this is my 3-inch piece. So again, cut that in half. Just like that. And then we'll have 2 pieces for those as well. All right, and then we're actually going to do the same exact thing we did with the red on the black as well. So we're going to take the black, fold it in half, move this out of the way here, fold it in half, and then round off the corner. Just like that. So when we open it up, it's this kind of rounded rectangular piece here. All right, and then we'll do the same for this one. And you can also fold these and cut them 2 at a time. I just want to show it a couple times so you can get what I'm doing here. So just round that corner out, smooth out the top if you need to. And then we'll have like that. And then we'll do the same thing for these 2 smaller ones too. So I'm actually going to stack these up. And just like we did with the red, cut 2 at a time. So we got them stacked and folded. And then round that corner off. Just like that. You can see. I'm actually going to smooth that out just a little bit more. It's a little rough on the top there. Do the same thing on this one. Okay, so we've got these. All right, and then I'm actually going to bring in a scrap piece of paper because we're going to actually add glue so we can essentially laminate these 2 pieces and basically have them centered at the base of the red like that. Then take my black piece and my glue stick. Since this is the extra fine paper, it will want to move and stretch on you while you're putting the glue on, but just if you do it really lightly and very carefully, you shouldn't have a problem with it. And I usually just go up one side, flip it around, and then do the other. And once it gets gluey, it's going to want to stretch out on you a little bit, and that's okay. All right, so we got glue on that. I'm going to bring this over here. And then I'm going to line up the bottom together. Okay, so that got a little stretched out further than I'd like. So I'm going to take my scissors and trim some of this off. We'll straighten that out. And then before I really tack it down here on this corner, I'm going to go ahead and round that off again. And you may find that as you're doing this, you'll need to do that as well. So it's a good little boo-boo to show. All right. And it doesn't have to be perfectly lined up either. You can kind of see there's like a little bit of red showing. You're not going to see that because it's going to be butted up against the fringe. So I'm just going to take my thumbnail and kind of smash that down so it gets really good and stuck on there. And then we'll do the rest. And you will want to work a little quickly with this because the next step you will want the glue stick to be a little tacky still. You don't want it to be completely dry or else it's going to be really hard to do the pleating that I'm going to show you in the next step. So we're going to line up the black just like that. And then smooth it out. And I found that layering the paper like this will get you that opaque black without damaging the crepe like you would with paint or a marker. And then it's also not very see-through, so you can't really see much of the black peeking through on the back of the petal either. So just a really neat trick there. I did try a couple of things. I tried the marker on this one and it kind of made it all crazy and I didn't really like the look of it, so we're doing this instead. So while I do the other two here, I do want to mention that you don't have to use the extra fine crepe. You can use doublet, you can use the heavy crepe. Just as long as you have like a red and a black, it'll work just fine. You'll probably find that the heavy crepe is a little harder to deal with because it does get very thick once you start bunching everything up towards the bottom of the petal, but it'll work just fine. You'll need to just trim off a little bit of extra. So I did this one with heavy crepe, and I had to kind of trim off the base a little bit so I'd be able to attach it to the flower. All right, so we're a little gluey here. Just line this up. And you especially want to make sure on these smaller petals that you do have some red on either side of the black, because that's going to be what breaks up those black markings when you put it all together. So like with this one, you can see it's getting a little too close to the edge. So I'm going to pull that back just a little bit, trim it, and then round off the corner again. Trim off about that much. With it being kind of a wet glue, I want to make sure that I'm not cutting too much or potentially ripping the paper as I round that corner out again. Straighten that out just a little bit, and then we can get that stuck down. And I apologize if it's a little bit shaky cam here. We've got like a gooseneck mount that will shake if my table shakes, so I apologize for that. Gotta make do with what you got, right? All right, and then the last one here, just glue one side, flip it around, do the other. Line up the bottom. then smooth it down. And not get it stuck to the base paper. All right, so then the next thing is close your glue stick, because I forget a lot of times and then it dries out and then I'm mad at myself. All right, so then the next thing is we're going to use the paint marker or the gel pen to show the white detail that you see on the petal, just like that. So first one I'm going to try here is the white gel pen. It will not give you as an opaque finish as the paint marker, but it'll work all the same. So if you take this and just kind of draw along the edge of the black paper, it'll give you a really fine white detail. And you don't have to go all the way around the edge, just kind of along the top and along the curve, just to about maybe about half of the way down, maybe 1/3 of the way down. And you can kind of build that up, like go back over it and build up that white just a little bit more. And you can go back and make it thicker if you want to. So you have a much thicker white line, you can fill it in. So that's the paint, or the gel pen. So you can see that it's not quite as that bright, stark white that you would get with a paint marker. You could also get away with doing white acrylic paint with a really fine liner brush if you have a steady hand to do that. I do not. So I'm going with the pen. All right, so with the paint marker, I've already primed it. With paint markers, you really want to give them a good shake. So that way you've got the paint all mixed up and it'll flow freely once you start pushing the tip down. So I'm going to do that. I've already got primed, so I'm going to start getting the paint to flow. All right, so I got a nice little puddle here. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually just going to go over what I just did with the gel pen. And this paint marker doesn't work very well, so I'm going to kind of go into my little puddle of paint here that it left when I was priming it, and basically just use the tip to paint with. And you don't have to have like a really thick, solid white line either. You can have some breaks in it. You can have some of the black show through. It doesn't have to be, you know, this perfect like streak of white, because it's not always going to be like that in nature either. So it does not have to be perfect. So just going along the edge here of the black, just lining that out and making a nice highlight. And as you can see here, it's not a perfectly even line, and it doesn't have to be. It could be thicker in some parts and really thin in some other parts, and it's just fine. that aside, and then we'll do these two little ones. Okay, set that aside and then do the last one. You probably think I'm crazy by having this flat bottom petal, but it will all make sense in just a moment, I promise. All right, so we've got our white detail on our petals now, and I'm going to double check this first one that I did just to make sure that the paint is dry. It does not take long for the paint to dry on this at all, so all right, but the glue is still a little wet. It's not super wet, so it's not going to tear, but it's also not completely hard and dry, so we can actually do this part. All right, so the first thing is we're actually going to kind of use our fingers to pleat the paper up, and it doesn't have to be a perfect pleat. You don't have to do a perfect corsetina fold or anything like that, but just have it pleated up, and then you're going to give it a good twist. And I start from the bottom and go up. Oh, my paint wasn't completely dry, so we're going to have some white splotches. That's okay. And give it a good twist. And then set that aside. And I'm going to check again on this paint. Okay, it looks like that's still a little wet, so we're going to give it a minute. But what this will do is it'll actually kind of crumple up the paper a little bit and give it that that pleated effect that poppy petals actually have. And then once we've done that, we'll kind of crush along the top of the petal to kind of make it even more crumpled and roughly looking like you see in nature on these poppies. It's a fun flower. We get to mess stuff up. So normally you'd see a paper flower all crumpled up and you'd think it was ruined, and it's not. Not on this one. It's exactly how it's supposed to look. So actually gonna even that out a little bit. Actually gonna fix that because that's a little taller on one side than the other. Okay, I think that's closer to being dry now. All right, so then again, we're gonna pleat the paper up. And then start at the base and give it a good twist. It gets nice and twisted up. Set that aside, and then we'll do two smaller ones as well. And just pleat those. And twist. Pleat and twist. And the way that I'm pleating is I'm just basically kind of walking my fingers across the paper and gathering it that way. But my nails are really strong, so I can grip the paper with my nails that way. If that doesn't work for you, you can always like very finely like fold it up, like doing a corsetina fold, and that'll work just fine too. All right, so we've got these all twisted. All right, I'm going to go back to my first one here and unfurl it. So you can see how it's kind of got a little mussed up texture now. All right, and you can see I've got a little smudge there, that's fine. All right, so then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go along the edge here and just kind of smash it down and wad it up and get all kinds of little creases in there. So now when I undo it, you can see that the top of that petal has just kind of been crushed. Undo it again a little bit further down too. All right. And what this will do also for you is make that paper really soft. This poppy in particular has a very thin kind of papery petal, so this works really well. And especially with the extra fine paper, you can get that really fine kind of crumpled look to the paper. All right, so we've got that. And do that for the rest of them. So untwist, unwrap. All right, so we're going to unwrap the rest of these here. Okay, like that. And then I'm gonna crunch up the top of these as well on all 4 petals. Do the top edge, and then you can kind of go down a little bit further and add some more creases and crunches as you go down. And then kind of pull it back out. Like that. Okay, and these last 2 we're going to do the same thing. So crunch them up. Back out, and then last one, same thing, crunch it up. You can even get your fingernails in there and add some more little creases as you're wadding it all up. And then unfurl it, and then you've got something like this. Then what you'll do, since you still have this pleating here along the bottom, so you're going to take your tacky glue, and you're actually going to do a line of glue right along the bottom here. Fairly thin line. I'm actually using the Fast Grab tacky glue. I find that works best with the extra fine crepe. It doesn't make it very soggy because the glue is just so thick. It doesn't get absorbed as fast as like the regular tacky glue or the quick dry, because that is very wet and runny. So I'm actually going to do this on both sides. So a line of glue on the front and the back, just along this bottom edge here. And this is going to get very messy because you'll have glue all over your fingers while you do it. But once you have the glue all on the edge, missed a couple spots here. Okay, so once you have the glue all along the edge, you're going to bunch it back up kind of along those pleats that you already made. So you're going to do kind of this bunching motion here. You can group it all together like that, and then you have this big old glob of glue which you can kind of squeeze and get a lot of that off now. Wipe that off on your paper. That, not pick up another petal while you do it. And you want to kind of bunch it together, but not to a sharp point. You kind of want to leave an edge on the bottom so it'll have something to grip when you attach it to the center. And then you'll want to kind of squish it flat so it's not super thick bunched up here. So you get something kind of like this, and it'll be a little curved. Okay, so we're going to set that aside to dry. We're going to do the other three while we're waiting for that to go through and dry. We're going to take our glue and very fine line along the bottom. And I actually just got this always ready tacky glue bottle, which is a total game changer in my opinion. Previously I just had my glue bottles upside down in a glass, so I wouldn't have to always like shake them like a crazy person, and just to get my glue out. And then we do the back. So same thing along the back. Just really fine line of tacky glue. Okay, right like that. And then I like to flip it over so I can kind of see what the front looks like as I bunch it up. You don't have to do that, but I find it's really helpful. And then we'll start bunching everything up again. So get it all scrunched up together. And while the glue's still wet, we can kind of squeeze some of it off, kind of mold it and shape it how we want it to look at the base. Get some of this extra glue off my fingers here. All right. So again, kind of squish it out flat like that. So you have kind of a more curved base here at the bottom where it's all bunched up. Okay, and set that aside, and then we'll do these two smaller ones. And most poppies are a 4-petal flower, which can be a little bit difficult to get them aligned properly when you're making them out of paper. If you feel uncomfortable doing the 2 large and 2 small petals, what you can do instead is you can actually make 6 of the smaller petals and then just apply them in like a triangle pattern, so you can have 1 and then 2, and then once those are on, then you fill out the other 3. So whichever works best for you. it'll get you the same kind of effect and the same look. And I will be honest with you, as someone in the States, I was not really all that familiar with the red poppy for Remembrance Day. It's just not something we celebrate here in the US. We actually do Veterans Day instead, but we don't have a flower for it necessarily. It is definitely something that's more recognized in other countries, especially the UK and Canada. So it wasn't until a Canadian friend was posting the poppy on Facebook a couple of years back that I actually knew what that was and what it was for. So learn something new every day, you guys. All right, so we're just gonna keep going with that. So we got this one and then one more. You can kind of see that that white paint wasn't completely dry when I started twisting the paper, but it'll all be okay. Once everything gets put together, a lot of the boo-boos will be covered up with the pleating and the shaping of the petals, so it's not going to show a whole lot if there's little mistakes with that white paint. If it really bothers you, you can always go back with acrylic paint and kind of paint over the white. I'm trying to use as little glue as possible, because if you go too thick with it, then you're just going to end up with a huge glob of it at the end when you're trying to squish everything together, and it's going to give you a whole big mess. All right, so then again, we're just going to gather everything back up along the pleats that we already made. Push that together. Get some of the excess glue off. And then you can kind of squish it down and shape it how you need it to be. And if you notice, when I was twisting, this part of the petal got a little ripped. So I'm just going to go in here and cut that edge off just a little bit so you can get rid of that. I like that. All right, so while we wait for those smaller ones to dry, what I'm going to do is actually take this and kind of very gently kind of cup this with my fingers, like right along that white line that we made. Not a big cup, just really lightly, like all the way around. Just kind of pull that and cup that out. So it makes a shape like that. And then you can either take your curling tool, or you can really just use your fingers, honestly, to shape this part of the petal and get it to come back out, or curve it back out. You need to do this. Like I said, just use your fingers to kind of massage it back out that way. And you can always kind of crunch it back up if you need to get those creases back in there along the top. Just like that. And what this does is it doesn't really even stretch out the paper all that much, but what it does is it kind of pulls out some of the pleats that are right here and flattens those out some more along that white edge so you see it more clearly. So it's like cupping, but not quite cupping. You kind of pull that along, just like that, and then take your curling tool, bend that back a little bit, or a lot. And what you'll notice as you're working with this paper is that it will kind of do its own stretching as you work with it. And that's completely fine. Like, it's supposed to do that. So you're going to get that extra stretch while you shape. And we want that. That's like exactly what we want, because we want these larger petals especially to go all as far as we can, like halfway around around the flower. So with this one, so you see you got your two small petals here, and then the two large petals that almost come and meet on either side here like that. So again, as you work with it, it is going to stretch out, and that's exactly what we want. And you may actually end up stretching it even more to get that width on these longer, or these wider petals rather. And then do the same thing for this one. And I'm actually stretching a little bit more along the top as well. So when I go to curl it out, it won't be as crumpled. It's gonna look like that. And the last one, pull out the pleats along the top edge of the black, stretch more along the top of the red, and curl out just a little bit. Okay, and then by this time, the glue along the bottom edge here should be mostly dry, if not completely dry. So now we're going to attach it to our center. I'm going to take this and add glue right here along the bottom edge, just like that. I'm going to take my center, flip it over so we see the back side, and then I'm actually going to apply it right here, right underneath where the fringe is. I'm going to flip it around and make sure that it's straight. We're going to hold that there for just a second. With the fast grab tacky glue, you don't have to hold it for very long. It really will hold on and grab really quickly. So we got that. Squish this down just a little bit more here. Okay, make sure that's good and adhered. And then this next one, which is the other small petal, we're going to do the same thing. Glue along the bottom edge. Flip it over again. And then we're going to put this directly across from where the other one was. Now we're going to flip it over, check our placement, pull it out a little bit. So it's like that. And again, you're going to kind of hold that in place for just a second. And while it's still wet, you can kind of make adjustments of to where you exactly want that to sit. But they are going to be directly across from each other. I'll flip it over one more time and just make sure that's really good and stuck on there, and give it a good little squeeze. Okay. And then we'll do the large petals. And what's handy with this, with it all gathered like this, and you get this kind of curved edge on the bottom, is that it will kind of line up really nicely with your rolled up fringe, and it'll fit really well. Stick this here, make sure that's centered. So I'm gonna, okay, I'm actually gonna bend this wire so you can see what I'm doing here. All right, so we're gonna make sure that it's centered between these two, which looks like it is. Squish that down, make sure it's really good and stuck on. Actually, I put that a little bit too far down, so I'm gonna take that off and line it up with the other red petals here, so they come out at about the same height all the way around. Go. Just like that. Just like that. Okay, and then we'll have our last petal. We're going to put on. Again, just glue right along the bottom, and then stick it on directly across from the other large red petal, which this is not. So I'm going to adjust that just a little bit. There we go. All right, and then check it from the front and make sure it looks like it is good and centered, like that. So it looks good and centered. And then we're going to just hold it there and squish it down and make sure that it is sitting properly at the right height. All right. So then we're actually going to let this dry just like this. So the petals will remain in place before we do any more adjustment and shaping. So I'm going to take a little break, let this sit for probably about 10 to 15 minutes for it to dry, and then we'll be back to finish it up. All right, so we are back and the glue is dry on these petals now, so we can kind of finish up the shaping and fine tuning for this bloom. So really what I'm going to focus on here are these bottom two petals. So it doesn't look like they're quite stretched out enough to touch, so we're going to kind of massage that out just a little bit. So I'm going to stretch here kind of again along where the black, the white line is, along the black to start, and then I'm going to gently stretch out along the top of the red just to get it to extend a little bit further out. So we've got something more like that. Then I'm going to do the same thing on this one. So again, just kind of stretching along the white line here kind of extend that out more. And then go back and do the stretching along the top edge of the red. And you want to be really gentle because this paper is super thin. Okay, so that's better. So now it's closer to them touching. They don't have to touch, but as close as we can get it, like that. And then I'm gonna actually pull these two smaller petals down just a little bit, or at least kind of push them down a little bit so they're a little bit more flat like these other ones. And then I'm actually going to stretch these just a little bit as well, more along the top of the red than anywhere else, just to extend those petals out some more, like that. And then stretch that out as well. And flatten it down. So that'll give you kind of a more flattened out poppy, which would be great if you're going to, say, change this and not have it on a stem and make it into a brooch or a pin that you want to wear on your lapel for Remembrance Day, which I will actually show you how to do in a later video, probably sometime next week or maybe towards the end of this week as well. So yeah, that is your red Flanders Poppy. Here's the other one. This one's a little bit more cupped and rounded, but they are both very pretty flowers. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to send this back over to Susan to finish it off with the foliage and the seed pods, and we will get it all wrapped up for you. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.